Welcome to the video solutions for the NCFE Functional Skills English Level 2 Writing Sample Paper 2. In this video we will go through the questions and you can get a better idea of what you want your answers to look like, as well as what to look out for when planning your answers. Welcome to the video solutions for the NCFE Functional Skills English Level 2 Writing Sample Paper 2. In this video we will go through the questions and you can get a better idea of what you want your answers to look like, as well as what to look out for when planning your answers. Before we look at the tasks, let's have a look at the mark scheme to see what you'll be assessed on during your writing exam. So you'll need to present information and ideas concisely, logically and persuasively. What does this mean? Well, information refers to facts. So you'll need to include certain facts in your answer. And ideas means your own ideas and opinions. You will need to present these concisely, which means that you're not repeating things and everything is written in a short and easy to understand manner. You'll need to present logically, which means that everything should be in a logical order and everything should flow on from each other. So each sentence flows on from the next. And persuasively, which means that you're trying to convince the examiner that your opinion is valid. You need to present information on complex subjects clearly and concisely. So this essentially means that your writing will have to be crystal clear and easy for anyone to understand. We've got that word concisely again, which simply means that we shouldn't be repeating things and we should try to make sure that everything is written in a simple way. Use a range of writing styles for different purposes. This means that we need to adapt our answers according to the audience and purpose that have been specified in the question. So, for example, if you're writing for a professional audience, you're going to be using a formal style. We'll see this in action in the answers. And finally, we need to use a range of sentence structures, including complex sentences and paragraphs, to organise written communication effectively. This means that we need to be using both short and longer sentences. So standalone sentences and sentences that connect different ideas together within them, using connectives or commas. We also need to make sure that we're using paragraphs in our answers. Remember that each paragraph you use should address a different issue or topic. Altogether, these form the composition of your answer. And the composition makes up 55 to 60% of your marks overall. So you need to make sure that your answers are clear and your writing is appropriate. The next part of the mark scheme focuses on punctuation, spelling and grammar. So we are asked to punctuate written text using commas, apostrophes and inverted commas accurately. So you need to make sure that, as well as including capital letters and full stops at the start and end of sentences, you're using commas in your answers. You may also need to use apostrophes and inverted commas. So that means quote marks. We need to ensure that written work is fit for purpose and audience, with accurate spelling and grammar that support clear meaning in a range of text types. This means that your writing will need to make sense no matter what the purpose and audience is. Your spelling will also have to be accurate throughout your answers in order to achieve high marks. The weighting for this is 40 to 45% and 45% of your exam overall. So make sure that your spelling, punctuation and grammar are well revised so that you'll be prepared in the exam. So let's look at the first task. Write an article for your Community Action Group magazine. So we've already been given the text type, an article, and the audience, Community Action Group magazine. You're a volunteer for a local community action group. Recently, a local beauty spot has been vandalised and you have offered to write an article about the incident for the next edition of the group's magazine. Your article needs to detail the following: the incident itself, the who, what, where, why, when and how, an appeal to readers to help out with a clean-up operation, how the community can work together to prevent things like this happening again. One document has been provided which contains useful content for the activity. You may choose to select and use any of the material for your writing. You may also want to use your own ideas to complete this activity. Okay, so we have been given a situation here. We are a volunteer and we are in a community action group. So we're going to create action in the community. We've seen that a beauty spot in the local area has been vandalised and we need to write an article about this. Now we're writing a magazine article rather than a newspaper article, so we're going to be a little bit more informal than usual. And we need to be focusing it on the local area because we're going to have a local audience. Our article needs to explain what happened. So we need to explain the incident. Who did it, what happened and why, and then when did it happen, how did it happen. And we've got these pictures here that might help us to come up with some ideas for this task. We also need to appeal to readers to help out with a clean-up operation. So a clean-up operation is being organised and we need to ask people if they will help us out with that. And then we need to explain how the community can work together to prevent things like this happening again. So for this you might want to draw up a mind map and come up with lots of ideas of how the community can prevent vandalism in the local area. So let's get started and have a look at a model answer to this question. Beloved beauty spot ruined by vicious vandals. Sadly, our local beachside benches on the cliffs to the east of the ice cream stand have been smashed and upturned by vandals. Furthermore, the vandals have also graffitied on the benches with offensive messages, which currently are unable to be removed without specialist equipment. As if this horrible level of destruction wasn't enough, litter has been scattered throughout the area, posing a serious risk to local wildlife and to young children who may pick up dangerous items. This article acts as a call to action. Your local community group is calling in specialist cleaners to remove the graffiti and repair the broken benches. We're additionally organising a litter pick on Saturday 19th of June to reduce the damage done by these vandals, with an open invitation to anyone who wants to join us. An action plan has been devised to prevent this happening again, with anti-criminal signs to be installed and a CCTV camera on the ice cream stand to deter the same people from coming back and wreaking more havoc. More funding for local PCSOs has been discussed and will be brought up at the next council meeting. So if you're not sure what a PCSO is, it stands for Police Community Support Officer, and it's essentially a group of people who help the police to keep the community safe. So let's think about the marking criteria. What makes this a good answer? So let's start by looking at the punctuation in the answer. Each sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. You need to make sure that you're doing this in all of your answers. We've also got capital letters for these abbreviations like CCTV and PCSOs. Next, let's have a look at the commas. So we've got commas used to break up information and ideas within sentences. So here we've got sadly to give an opinion there, and then our local beachside benches on the cliffs to the east of the ice cream stand. So we've divided up the sentence to show the location of the benches, and then we're explaining what's happened to them. Other punctuation that we've got includes apostrophes. So here we have we're. This is a contraction of the words we and are, and because we have gotten rid of the A in are, the apostrophe goes in the middle where the A was. We've also got a hyphen used in anti-criminal. Now, hyphens are used to join two words together to create one word with a single meaning. You could try to use a greater range of punctuation than has been used here. For example, you can include dashes, colons, question marks, or exclamation marks. But here, the use of punctuation is correct throughout, so this answer would achieve full marks. Now let's look at grammar and spelling. So, to achieve strong grammar, your sentences will need to be accurate and make sense on their own. We know that all of these sentences in this answer make sense because we read it through and all of the sentences made perfect sense. They were crystal clear. We've also got the correct use of tenses in the answer. So for example, in this last sentence, more funding for local PCSOs has been discussed and will be brought up at the next council meeting. We've got the use of past tense at the start. More funding has been discussed in the past. And then we've got future tense. It's been discussed and in the future it will be brought up at the next council meeting. So the correct use of tense there. We've also got the correct use of spelling throughout the answer. And we've got some quite difficult to spell words that have been included. So for example, we've got scattered, throughout, and dangerous. Try to include a few more sort of sophisticated words that might be a bit trickier to spell in your answers, because this will show that you've got really good control of spelling. If you struggle with spelling, the best thing to do is just practice, practice, practice. And the more reading that you do, the more familiar with how to spell certain words you will get. In your exam, you'll have to make sure that all of your answers are crystal clear and really easy to understand. And this answer definitely does that. For example, in this sentence, we start with furthermore to show that we're linking to the previous sentence and adding information. Then we've got the vandals have also graffitied the benches with offensive messages. And we can understand really clearly what has happened there. And then which currently are unable to be removed without specialist equipment. So from this, it's really easy for the reader to understand that there has been graffiti on the benches and offensive messages have been written, and these can't be removed without specialist equipment. So all of that makes perfect sense to the reader. As well as being clear, your answers will need to be appropriately detailed and written with an appropriate length. Often you'll be given a word count in the question, but in this one we don't have any word count. So you'll have to sort of work out how much you should be writing by yourself. Generally, you should try to write about 3, 4 or 5 paragraphs in your answers. Crucially, you should try to include the details that have been asked in the question. So in this question, we've been told that your article needs to detail the following. So we've got an explanation of the incident. We definitely have that in this first paragraph here. The incident is explained in some detail there. We've got an appeal to readers to help out with a cleanup operation in the second paragraph. And we've included appropriate details about the litter pick, saying that it's on Saturday the 19th of June and it's an open invitation for anyone who wants to join. Finally, we have explained how the community can work together to prevent things like this happening again in the final paragraph there. So explaining in some detail a few of the things that have been done to prevent it happening again. So overall, this is a really appropriate level of detail and it's an appropriate length to cover all of the points that were asked in the question. Next, let's consider formatting and organisation. So in the question, you will be given a text type, and the text type that we've been given is an article. specifically a magazine article. Now, when you're writing an article, you need to make sure that you are including a heading. That's very important. This answer doesn't include very many organisational features, apart from a heading and some paragraphs. But you could also use subheadings. You could include the author's name, perhaps text boxes or bullet points, just to show the examiner that you know how to organise your writing effectively. But as a bare minimum, make sure that if you're writing an article, you are using a heading and you are using paragraphs throughout your answer. During your writing exam, you'll also need to make sure that your answers are cohesive. So this basically means that you are using sort of connectives and commas to join up ideas and make sure that everything flows together to create an answer that makes logical sense. So for example, in this paragraph, we've got the use of a connective word here, furthermore, to add on information and to connect to the previous idea. We've also got sentences that flow on from one another and refer to each other. So for example, in this paragraph, it says, as if this horrible level of destruction wasn't enough. So we're referring to this horrible level of destruction, which has been described in the previous sentences. The paragraphs in this answer are also linked in a really cohesive way. So for example, this first paragraph is all about the problems that have been occurring. And then the following paragraph explains what the reader can do to help. And then finally, we've got what the community is doing to try and stop these issues. So it's really important to try and structure your answer logically. So in this answer, it's a really good idea to start with that first bullet point, explaining what exactly has happened before we're appealing to the readers and saying how the community can work together to stop these issues from happening. Your language and register will also have to be appropriate throughout. How do we know that the language and register in this answer is appropriate? Well, we need to look at the audience and purpose for this. So we know that the purpose is to give details about an incident that has happened. It needs to appeal to readers to help out with a cleanup operation, and it needs to explain how the community can work together to prevent the issues. So that's the purpose. Who are the audience? Well, we are looking at the Community Action Group magazine. So the audience are going to be readers of this magazine, and they're going to be members of this community action group. They're going to be invested in local issues. So we have adapted our language to the purpose and audience of this text. Words like our show that we are speaking to fellow members of the community, and the mention of the cliffs to the east of the ice cream stand shows that we're talking to locals who know the area really well. We've also got a text that is really well suited to the purpose. So it satisfies all of the different parts of the question, and it focuses on the issue of resolving the vandalism incident throughout. It's generally written in quite a formal style. So for example, we've got sophisticated words like furthermore. But we've also got these contractions. So for example, we have the contraction we're, and this makes it slightly less formal because we're writing for a general readership rather than a group of professionals. We have a serious tone being used throughout to discuss a serious issue. So for example, we've got damage done by vandals, and we also have horrible level of destruction. So these kinds of phrases emphasise the seriousness of the issue and persuade the reader that they should join the call to action. They should go and help out with the litter pick. So overall, the text meets the criteria because it's really persuasive, and it is suited to the audience and purpose that have been specified in the question. Finally, this answer contains a lot of longer sentences that are more detailed and join ideas together. So for example, we have, as if this horrible level of destruction wasn't enough, litter has been scattered throughout the area, posing a serious risk to local wildlife and to young children who may pick up dangerous items. So we can see that that's quite a long sentence, but it still makes sense despite how long it is. Okay, and we've got lots of different ideas that have been included and linked together here. So saying that there has been a horrible level of destruction, and then going into more detail about other issues that have happened. So litter being scattered throughout the area is another piece of information that we've added there. Then we have the impact of this litter that's been scattered. So it poses a risk to local wildlife, and, so we've got a connective to add even more information there, and to young children. And then it explains that these young children may pick up the dangerous items. So we've included lots of ideas within the same sentence to join them together. See if you can try to join ideas together within your own answers and try to form longer sentences as well as short ones. So overall, this is a really good answer because it matches up with all of the marking criteria that we've been given. So in the question, we have been asked to present information and ideas concisely, logically and persuasively, and we have definitely done that. We've got persuasive techniques that have been used throughout to convince the reader that they should join this litter pick. We've presented information on complex subjects clearly and concisely. So we haven't repeated anything, everything is very concise, and everything is very clear and easy for the reader to understand. We've used an appropriate writing style that is fit for the purpose, so we focused on the purpose set out in the question throughout the answer, and we've used an appropriate writing style, adapting our tone and style of writing to the audience and the purpose of the text. A wide range of sentence structures have been used, as well as paragraphs, so that the information is organised really effectively. So we looked at how each paragraph was sort of structured to follow on from the previous one. Punctuation has been used accurately, and commas and apostrophes were used correctly in the answer. And finally, the work is fit for purpose and audience with accurate spelling and grammar that support clear meaning. So the spelling was accurate and the grammar was accurate as well. So overall, it's a fantastic answer because we've considered all of the criteria and applied it to our answer. Now let's take a look at the second activity, which asks us to write a letter of complaint, so that's our text type, to an airline company, so that's our audience. You recently had to catch an early morning flight for a work meeting. The flight was delayed for several hours and then it was cancelled with no information given at any point as to the reason why. You do not feel that this is acceptable and have decided to complain to the airline. Write a letter of complaint to the airline company. You should consider how you might persuade them to compensate you. Okay, so here's our purpose. We need to persuade the airline company to give us compensation, to give us money or some other form of compensation for the flight. And then we've been told to address our letter to this address here. And then we have two documents that have been provided with useful content for the activity, and we can use this content or we can use our own ideas. So let's have a quick look. So the first document says Easy Air Customer Charter, our pledge to you, a big smile. You can expect open and up-to-date service from all our staff. Make it easy. We'll make sure you know what to expect at every stage of your trip. Open and frank. We'll always be straight with you and keep you informed at all times. So we can see that the information in this document, the promises that they are making in this customer charter, don't quite match up with what we've been told in the question, because we were given no information at any point about why our flight was cancelled. And this suggests that we should have been given an up-to-date service. We should have been told what to expect and been kept informed. The next document shows the amount of money, the amount of compensation that you can get if your flight is delayed. So £400 for a delay of 3 hours or more than 4 hours is £600. So we've been told in the question that our flight was delayed for several hours. So we're not quite sure how many hours, but you could say that it's 3 hours and ask for £400, or you could say that it was delayed for more than 4 hours and ask for £600. So we're given quite a lot of information that might inspire us to write our answer here. But we need to focus on the audience, the purpose and the text type. So the text type's a letter of complaint, the audience is the airline company, so we need to be formal and professional even though that we're complaining, so we're going to be using quite a negative tone. So let's take a look at a model answer to this question. So the student has started by giving the addresses of the sender and the recipient of the letter. And then they have said, "Dear Sir, Madam, I am writing to complain about my recent flight with EasyAir from Leeds to Manchester at 4:45 a.m. My flight was urgent for an important work meeting with a strict time deadline and was delayed for 6 hours, which resulted in me missing the meeting. This is unacceptable, especially considering the level of customer service promised on your website. Your pledge to customers includes you saying, "We'll always be straight with you and keep you informed at all times." But this was the opposite of the service I received. I could hardly locate any staff that were actually present at the airport, and the ones I did find were beyond unhelpful. I was told to simply get a replacement train or find my own way of transportation, which I find absolutely ridiculous. In light of this service, which is in direct contradiction of your customer pledge, I am asking for compensation. Based on the Civil Aviation Authority's guidance, I am entitled to £600 for the length of my flight delay. This is all I ask for, despite believing I deserve much more for how much inconvenience I experienced. Yours faithfully, John Smithy." Okay, so let's jump right into the analysis and see what makes this a good answer. So let's start by looking at the punctuation. We've got "Dear Sir" and we've got a slash for "Madam" because we're not sure whether we are addressing someone that's male or female. We've also got capital letters and full stops at the start and end of each sentence. And we've also got capital letters used for proper nouns. So proper nouns include things like the names of places such as Leeds and Manchester, the names of companies, so EasyAir here, and organisations like the Civil Aviation Authority, and then for names as well, so John Smithy is capitalised at the end there. We've also got the accurate use of commas throughout the answer. So we need to use commas whenever we need to take a little breath in a sentence and add more information. So my flight was urgent, and then we take a little breath and move on to a slightly different clause, a slightly different idea for an important work meeting with a strict time deadline. And then we've got another comma there and a connective to add more information, and was delayed for 6 hours, which resulted in me missing the meeting. So try to use commas to join ideas together within your sentences throughout your answers. What other examples of punctuation have we got in here? So we've got an apostrophe used on the Civil Aviation Authority's guidance, because the guidance is owned by the Civil Aviation Authority, we need a possessive apostrophe at the end of authority there. We've also got a quotation, so we've used these quote marks. We'll always be straight with you and keep you informed at all times. We're using quote marks there because we have used this quote from their charter. So overall, we've got a range of punctuation that has been used effectively and correctly throughout the answer. And you should try to use a range of punctuation in your own answer. See if you can go online and have a look at different types of punctuation and see how to use them correctly. Next, let's consider grammar and spelling in this answer. So, in order to be grammatically correct, your sentences will need to be accurate and each sentence needs to make sense on its own. So make sure that when you've written your answer, you read over it to make sure that every single sentence makes sense and no sentences have been started and then stopped halfway through. Our spelling also needs to be accurate throughout our answer. If you're not very good at spelling, don't worry too much about this. You just need to practice and perhaps try to read quite often, because reading will familiarise you with how to spell lots of different words. So in this answer, we have quite a few more difficult to spell words that have been spelled correctly. So for example, we've got contradiction, that's quite an ambitious word there. Compensation, we've got entitled, and inconvenience. So you don't have to know how to spell all of these words, but trying to use a few more complex words throughout your answer will show the examiner that you really understand how to spell a variety of words. Accurate spelling, punctuation and grammar will help you to make sure that all of your writing is clear and makes sense. Try reading your answers in your head after you have written them, or you could read them out loud if you're doing practice answers at home. As well as being clear, all of your answers will need to be an appropriate length and contain appropriate details. So sometimes questions will give us a word count, but we haven't got one here. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to try to write around 3 to 4 paragraphs, and we've got 3 nice and long paragraphs here. So we've definitely met the length requirements. In terms of detail, we need to consider the details that have been asked of us in the question. So we need to explain what has happened to our flight, because that's explained here. You need to complain to the airline, so you need to tell them what happened. And we also need to persuade them to compensate us. And that's definitely done in the answer. So we've explained in some detail what happened, including the amount of time that they were delayed for, the time of the flight, where the flight was going, the fact that the flight was with the Easy Air company, and what happened as a result that they missed the meeting. And we've used details from the documents to help us out here. So for example, they've said that they want £600 compensation according to the Civil Aviation Authority's guidance. So see if you can use the documents for inspiration to help you include more detail. You can also create a sort of spider diagram, a kind of mind map before you start writing, so that you are sure that you've got lots of details that you can include there. But make sure that you're only including relevant details. You need to explain what happened and persuade in this letter here, so don't go off topic at any point. Next, let's take a look at how the answer has been formatted and organised. So, to organise your answer effectively and use the correct formatting, you need to know the text type that you've been asked to write. So one of the first things you should identify in the question is the text type. And we've been told that we need to write a letter of complaint, and we need to address our letter to this address here. So the student has used that address, and they've also included, importantly, the address of the sender as well. We've then got a polite greeting, dear sir, madam, and we have a polite sign-off followed by the sender's name. So those are all of the organisational features that you'll need to include in a letter there. You also need to make sure that in every single answer you write, you are using paragraphs to structure your answers. If you're not sure how to use paragraphs, just remember that each paragraph should be speaking about a slightly different topic. So, for example, in this answer, we've got an introduction here which explains what happened with the flight, and then we have a paragraph about what happened when they tried to contact the staff after they missed the flight. And then finally, they've explained in this paragraph what they want to happen, how they want to be compensated. Now let's take a look at how the source has been organised and formatted. So you need to choose an appropriate range of organisational features to match up with the text type that you've been asked to write. This will make your text clearer and fit for purpose. So whenever you're writing a letter, you will need to include the following features. You will need the address of the sender in the top right and the date underneath this address. You'll also need the address of the recipient, so the person that you're sending the letter to, and this needs to be just underneath the sender's address and aligned to the left. You'll then need a greeting, so a polite greeting such as "Dear Sir, Madam." And then you need to sign off the letter. Here the student has used "yours faithfully" because we do not know the name of the person we're writing to. We've used a sort of anonymous "Dear Sir, Madam" rather than "Dear Mr. Jones." So if you did know the person that you were writing to, if you knew their name, then you would use "yours sincerely" instead. So make sure that you're using the right sign off there. And then finally include the name of the sender. And with every single answer that you write, regardless of what text type you're writing, you will also need to be including paragraphs to separate out your ideas in every single answer. One really important element of the marking criteria is that your answers should be cohesive. So this means that everything should be linked together and ideas should be joined up so that everything flows in a logical order. So we've already taken a look at how the paragraphs are about different things that follow on from each other really effectively. But we also need to make sure that our sentences are all linked together and they flow on from each other. So for example, we've got a quote from the Easy Air customer support team here. We've got, "We'll always be straight with you and keep you informed." But this was the opposite of the service that they received. So they're suggesting there that they were not informed. And then they go on to explain this in more detail, saying, "I could hardly locate any staff that were actually present, and the ones I did find were beyond unhelpful." And then they go on to explain what the members of staff that they did find said to them. They say that "I was told to simply get a replacement train or find my own way of transportation." So can you see how each sentence within this paragraph sort of flows on from the previous one and explains what happened in a sort of chronological order? As well as being clear and cohesive, your answers will need to use an appropriate language and register. So the language in this answer needs to be appropriate to the audience and purpose. It's suited to the purpose of the text because we've been asked to write a letter of complaint about a flight, and the answer is focused on the topic and task throughout. It's also suited to the audience. So we've been told that we need to write for the airline company. And we've been given an example of an airline company that we can write to here, Easier. So we don't know anyone from the company personally, so we've used this generic address, Dear Sir, Madam, and we've used yours faithfully. So whenever you don't know who you're writing for, you don't know their name, then you should use yours faithfully. If you do know their name, you should be using yours sincerely. Try to remember that difference. We've got formal language that's been used throughout because even though we're complaining, we're using quite a negative tone. So we're saying that they believe that they deserve much more because of the inconvenience and it's unacceptable. So that's quite negative, as you would expect from a letter of complaint. But we're also using formal language. We're staying professional because we're writing to a professional company. So using standard English throughout, saying your pledge to customers, using quite formal tone there, quite sophisticated language. Finally, we've got the use of evidence to support various points and to persuade the reader that we are entitled to compensation. So we've got the evidence from this document here that has been used to support the fact that they're entitled to £600 for the length of their delay. So that is really convincing the reader that compensation should be given. We've also got in this answer quite a few really detailed sentences that link multiple ideas together. So we saw how commas were used to link this sentence together. My flight was urgent is one idea, and then for an important work meeting with a strict time deadline is another idea there that has been linked using a comma. And then we've got a connective word, and, to explain that the flight was delayed for 6 hours. And then we've got another connective word, which resulted in me missing the meeting. So we've got the use of some slightly longer sentences that connect ideas together. And this is really going to help your answers to be extra cohesive and show that you can connect ideas together really effectively to impress the examiner. Okay, so now we've had a really detailed look at this answer and we can see how it matches up with all of the marking criteria. So if we go back to the criteria here, we can see that all of the criteria has been met. Information and ideas have been presented concisely. We haven't got any repetition throughout the answer. It's presented logically, in a logical order with paragraphs that flow on from each other, and persuasively, using persuasive techniques such as supporting our opinions with facts. We've presented some information on a complex subject really clearly and concisely throughout the answer, so that all of the answer makes sense and is easy for the reader to understand. We've used an appropriate writing style that is fit for the purpose. We've used quite a negative tone to write a letter of complaint, but we have remained formal throughout because the purpose is to persuade this airline to give us compensation. We need to be respectful towards them. We've used a range of sentence structures, including complex sentences and paragraphs, to organise written communication effectively. So we've got paragraphs throughout, and we saw that we've been using longer sentences that connect ideas together. Our punctuation has been accurate throughout, and we've used quite a range there as well. And the work is fit for the purpose and audience. Accurate spelling and grammar have been used throughout to support clear meaning. So overall, it's a really fantastic answer and would achieve very high marks. See if you can use this answer to come up with your own ideas and write your own answers. And if you've already written an answer, then you might want to try rewriting it based on what you've learned today.